Montañez is here with us in the studio to look through the French press.
Good morning,
Elena, good morning to you. Now, I imagine the economic crisis, big news here in Europe, I imagine that's still dominating the front pages of the French press.
You'd be right. I've got the front pages now to show you. So let's start then at Le Figaro. They've got agreement between the government and the majority as a headline. Now, there wasn't really any disagreement within the ruling UMP about what should be done, but the paper announces that they have indeed come up with a plan to reduce France's budget deficit. It involves reducing tax breaks that you get when you sell your house and putting up social contributions on capital gains and so on. Now, Le Figaro really presents this as a government victory. Libération, though, on the left does point out that Sarkozy has had to take a step back here. He's had to drop the idea of installing a golden rule which would limit the amount of budget deficit you could have in the French constitution, because the socialists have refused to vote for it, saying that it was a cheap attempt to try and fight the presidential election on the economic crisis.
So perhaps seeing the difference there between the right-leaning and the left-leaning French press.
Yes, we can really see we're in a presidential campaign era now, really. They're quite partisan every day.
OK, so looking towards the presidential election coming up next year, what are the papers making of that and the economic crisis playing into that?
Well, Le Parisien leads on this. They've got facing the crisis, what are the plans of the different candidates for the presidency? They say it's the socialist François Hollande who's doing best out of this because he's done most of his campaigning on the economy. They say his socialist rival Martine Aubry has lost out a bit by campaigning on crime and social issues and so on, and not focusing enough on the economy. But it's bad news for Sarkozy. He comes out the loser against either of those candidates. But the paper has talked to some of his right-wing allies and they say he's not worried. He's trying to look presidential by concentrating on the big international problem of the economy rather than his own electoral chances, and he's hoping that will play well with the public.
Well, yeah, there's been a lot of negative comments in the past about him commenting too much on his personal life, so perhaps if he stays on the economy, that might be a better tactic. OK, on to that health scandal we were talking about yesterday, Elena. A laboratory apparently caught out lying about its prescription drugs.
Yes, yesterday we were talking about Servier, the laboratory, having apparently lied about the drug Mediator, which is an anti-diabetic drug that turned out to have a strong amphetamine in it, and they're now facing criminal charges which could result in them being banned from selling drugs at all in France because this drug was linked to a large number of deaths. Now, it makes the front page of Libération today. It says Servier reoffends on the front page. Now, what they're talking about is another completely different drug called Protolos, which was licensed in 2004 to deal with osteoporosis. But apparently it also has potentially fatal side effects that were deliberately hidden by the company. Now, there's a testimony inside the paper of a doctor who says that the company falsified his expert opinion about both drugs, and about Mediator, apparently this falsification dates back to 1973 when they lied about it in order to get it licensed by the French regulatory body. Now, there's that criminal case going on against them, as I said, and more than 300 people, according to the paper, are also planning to sue the laboratory over the side effects of that drug.
A very worrying story there, worrying revelations indeed. On to something completely different now. The Catholic newspaper Le Croix on the difficulties of deleting your past online.
Yes, we all have things we'd probably like to delete from the internet, don't we?
No comments there.
Well, whether it's embarrassing photos or more serious things like a spent criminal conviction, you just can't delete them because even if you do yourself from Facebook, for example, they do remain in a cache, so you could search for them and find them. The paper says that the French lawmakers are trying to pass a law forcing internet companies to delete stuff, but it's impossible really because Google, Facebook and so on are all based in the US, where politicians just haven't looked at the issue.
OK, very briefly, finish off with sports and a rather embarrassing night last night for French football.
Yes, there was a no-score draw against Romania, which is pretty embarrassing for the new French team. But according to Le Parisien, it wasn't their fault. It was the grass.
Of course it was, absolutely.
Absolutely. The lawn apparently had only just recently been planted and hadn't taken up root properly, which apparently ruined the French team's technique.
Now, we can't say bad losers because they didn't technically lose, but a bit of sour grapes there, I feel.
It is a little bit, isn't it? Once you're blaming the grass, it's a last-ditch excuse, isn't it?
OK, well, thanks very much indeed, Elena Casas Montañez, for that French press review. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
We'll do